So the archaeologist I chose was Ver Gordon Child, early archaeologist from born in the 1930s and became prominent during the early 1900s and only lived to 65. V. Gordon Child was an Australian-born archaeologist with interest in European prehistory. His early childhood existed as a homeschool origin, later getting into a traditional English grammar school in Australia with the opportunity to win a grant and have an opportunity to study at Oxford. So that's where his traditional education came from, was from Oxford. He went on to become a prominent figure in the history and language departments in Oxford, and this is where he actually became very interested in labor movements, as well as taking up very interesting socialist and Marxist ideologies. The Child's career was based on the idea that archaeology can be used as a tool to evaluate the way cultures lived in social, political, and economical ways. This was emphasized in European and Middle Eastern relations through commodities rediscovered as artifacts. Because of his socialist viewpoints, he was often kept from lecturing at different universities across Europe as well as in Australia, as well as denied entry to the United States as guest lecturers in universities like Yale and Harvard, which he was often invited to by numerous different sociologists, archaeologists, and anthropologists. He was well thought of as a prehistorian. He later became the head of the Institute of Archaeology in London after he spent time as a secretary for the Library of Archaeology, and later had an opportunity to lecture. As we see here in this photo, this is the Institute of Archaeology, all their members with Child in the middle. Different archaeological discoveries. One of his largest ones was a site called Scarborough, a completely intact village on the Scottish islands of Orkney Island, as well as some other stone and Iron Age sites that showed transition periods that Child liked to advocate for using his Marxist ideology. He often talked about this Scarborough as a classic Iron Age site, but later found out it was actually much older than that, and it was a Neolithic site. He also was attributed to discovering different Iron Age hill forts throughout Berkshire and other English and Scottish sites. This is an example of the Neolithic site in Scotland. As you can see, it's all of a stone discovery. None of this is very reconstructed. Some of it is just for safety and things like that, but a lot of it is traditional as he found it, uncovered by the sand dunes on these islands where there's no trees discovered, so everything was actually made of stone. So this was a very interesting site that he got to take part of and actually had it. Different contributions. So using this idea of production to guide his understanding, Child often saw artifacts linked among cultures and saw societal differences between different groups, making larger cultural observations based off of how this object was produced, as well as the same object used and produced in a different culture around the world. He used this idea to kind of create this idea of revolutions through societal periods. So we're all very familiar with the Neolithic to agricultural revolutions and so forth into industrial revolutions. So Child's often credited for becoming a proponent of this, linking these religious, economic, legal, political, and social ideas together, using all these different anthropological, geology, biology, these different disciplines. His biggest influences on archaeology are his Marxist theory and cultural historical history theory. So as society has evolved through a series of progressive stages, and these are primitive communism with Marxist theory believing that it was held in classless hunter-gatherer societies, which later evolved into feudal stages and even later into slave-based, or from slave-based societies to feudal societies, and to our capitalist society today, with the opportunity to grow larger into what he saw as the next stage of socialist and then communist societies. So some major publications. These three were one of his bigger ones, as he has up to 26 published by himself, and then many other that used him and riffed off his ideas and things like that. The biggest one was Man Makes Himself, was his first book. It was republished in 2003. First it was published in I want to say 1942, but I didn't write that down and I should have. This talks about that idea of the revolutionary ideas. So from going from Neolithic periods into your agricultural periods and having these big, stark human evolutional periods. And we see that across different time periods and different social groups at different times, but it's just an indication that all humans kind of act and live and believe in the same things. And that was one of his biggest things. That's where we kind of get the idea of the historical theory from his book, The Aryans, A Study of Indo-European Origins. It discusses things of broader context and has the idea that different groups have different time periods and can be kind of observed in one kind of holistic view just from how they behaved and how that progressed through history. And that is the life of Golden Childs. Anybody have any questions or concerns?